Hi, I'm Liz Naumovski, host of Finance is Personal. We all think we're ready for whatever life hands us, but when the unexpected happens, the reality is we are always unprepared. That's why it's important for women to take the time to have what's been referred to as courageous conversations with their loved ones before a sudden serious illness strikes or a crisis happens. And what about women and their finances? According to a recent study, at some point in their lifetime, 90% of women will be required to play the role of sole financial decision maker. And when this happens, what are the challenges that women face in terms of their financial well-being? Joining me today is Jane Blaufus, best-selling author, international speaker, and business coach. She's here to talk about the courageous conversations, women's wealth and health, and her award-winning book, With the Stroke of a Pen, Claim Your Life. Welcome to the show, Jane. Thank you for coming.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Oh, that's great. I read the book, and I loved it. And you told me not to read it in public, and I read it on the subway on my way to work every day and on my way back. And it was amazing. You had me high, you had me low, you had me all over the place. So my first question to you is, let's talk about the courageous conversation. What is that?
A courageous conversation is a conversation that takes you totally out of your comfort zone and makes you talk about things that you really don't want to talk about.
Okay, so that to me would be finance, because a lot of women don't want to talk about finance.
It's not a romantic discussion for some reason. It's not sexy. But finance is something that gets into our lives, into our sleep, into our self-esteem. It gets into everything. So talking about finances is one of the most courageous conversations I believe a woman needs to have.
Okay, so how does a woman broach this? Because a lot of times they're alone. They are in some sort of a relationship with someone, whether it's a marriage, whether it's common law, whether they're boyfriend and girlfriend. You can talk about parents, they've got children. I mean, there's so many different aspects. So how do you broach this?
Well, I always say it starts internally first. You have to know what you want first. So the first courageous conversation, Liz, is with yourself. Then it's broaching, as you say, the subject with your loved ones.
Wait, break it down. How do you have that with yourself? What do you do?
You have to face your own immortality. You have to look in the mirror and realize, none of us are getting out of this alive.
Right.
There's two things in life that are certain, death and taxes.
Absolutely.
And so we're all going. I don't know what my expiry date is, and I don't want to know, thank you very much.
Yeah, I don't think any of us do.
But we have to have a conversation with ourselves first and determine what it is that we want. Because if we don't know what it is that we want, we can't articulate it to anybody else. So it starts with ourselves first.
Right.
Once you've had that conversation with yourself, then it's important that you have it with your loved ones. Because the one thing I know for certain is people suffer a lot of angst when a loved one goes and they have no idea what it is that they might want. They suffer with trying to make decisions that are beyond their control because they're trying to deal with the loss, but then they have to figure out what to do with everything. So I often say to couples, have a date night to talk about finances. Go out somewhere, have dinner, but you talk about finances. You don't talk about your kids or whatever, but you talk about money. And the one thing I see so many times is couples that are getting ready to say, I do, never do what they should do before that, which is have a conversation about money.
It's really interesting because a lot of people think, well, my money is my money, their money is their money, and what difference does that make? But you're right. I mean, before you move in together, before you get married, while you're married, you really do need to have these conversations, because I've done shows where we've talked about estate planning, and one of my guests had said she would sit and talk to a couple, and the couple would come in and the husband or the spouse would say, you know what, I'm kind of done working. I think I'm going to retire right now. And the wife says, No, you've got another 5 years, because there's so many things that we want to do right now, and people are not on the same page.
No, quite often they aren't, because they don't have these kind of conversations. And the thing is that's when you get hit with the zinger. You're not allowed to retire for 5 more years. Well, wait a minute, who put you in charge? Yeah. And the thing is that these are important conversations, because you do need to be on the same page when it comes to money. And back to what we were just talking about a minute ago about getting into a relationship. Do you know what your partner's credit score is? Do you know what kind of debt they're bringing in? Do you understand their philosophy about money? Are they a saver or are they a spender? Because once you get legally bound, you become legally responsible for things. And people just think, my money's mine, yours is yours. Mm-mm.
Well, you know what? It's funny because we just did a show on the ABCs of financial literacy. And that's about when you're opening up a new client application form. Typically, if it's at a brokerage firm or whatever, they will ask you, do you have a common law partner? Do you have a spouse? How much is your spouse or common law partner worth? And how much money do they make a year? And women often get very infuriated by this because they're like, this is my account, it has nothing to do with my spouse or my partner. But actually it does, because it allows people to understand your risk tolerance, and then you actually know exactly how much money you have and how much money you've saved.
Well, the other thing too is that they want to know that if they're maybe going to loan you money or do whatever, if something happens to you and you are no longer capable of earning an income, then is there somebody else that's going to be able to continue to, pay the loan off or do whatever? So a lot of people don't get it. They just think that, money will take care of itself and they don't really need to worry about it. And unfortunately, a lot of them are women.
And that's just it. Speaking of, you and I are women, and we're doing this show for women. And years ago, you got the shock of a lifetime. You worked in the industry. You were well prepared. You were in insurance. You knew exactly, background and finances and everything else. And all of a sudden, you get hit with this tragedy, and you're shocked, and you don't know where to turn to. Yet you thought that you would be prepared.
Yeah, you don't think on a sunny Sunday afternoon a police officer is going to walk up your driveway and change your life in less than 60 seconds. That's what happened to me. He came to deliver the news that my 39-year-old husband had been killed in an accident, and I suddenly became a widow with a 12-and-a-half-year-old daughter. And as you say, I was in the life insurance business. I thought I had everything taken care of. I foolishly did. I was a little bit too cocky in that respect. I thought, I'll be fine. If anything ever happens to me, I'll be fine because I know what I'm doing. Well, wrong. I got blindsided by a whole bunch of things that I didn't anticipate. But there I was, Liz, thrust into the biggest adult financial decisions of my entire life. And when my mother said to me, Jane, would you like peas or carrots with dinner? I'd go, pardon? I was incapable of making a decision about a vegetable, yet there I was making all these monumental financial decisions, and I was lost. Without my advisor, my financial advisor, who I had a great trust relationship with, you might as well have stuck me in a dinghy and sent me out to sea.
But you know what? You're not alone, because there are so many women out there, whether they're in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 80s, they've lost a loved one, and all of a sudden now they are in charge of their finances. They could be an executor, they could be in charge of paying all the bills, and they've never done this before. And all of a sudden, they are forced to make these incredible decisions that they might not be educated to do or have a background to help them out. I think one of the key things is that we as women need to ask questions. When you are in that type of a position, the best thing to do is surround yourself with really good people and ask questions.
There are no stupid questions when it comes to money.
Agreed.
The stupid questions are the ones we keep to ourselves and never ask. And it isn't a sign of not being intelligent or not being informed or whatever. Asking questions is the greatest way to gain clarity. And in my case, I was dealing with a tragedy, so my reasoning was not on spot anymore. Everything I knew, like I said, went out the window. And back to your stat at the beginning, 90% of women do at one point in their life become the sole financial decision maker in their own home. And the one thing about death is it doesn't discriminate with age.
Right.
I've met widows in their 20s, back to yours, to widows in their 80s. I was 44 when my husband was killed. And just life turned on its head in an instant. I don't wish that on anybody.
No, I don't either. It's got to be one of the worst things to go through.
It's terrible.
Jane and I will be back after the break to talk more about claiming your life. back to Finances Personal. I'm Liz Naumovski, and I'm here today with best-selling author, international speaker, and business coach, Jane Blaufus. Jane,
Yes.
I want to go back to your book again. It was an incredible read, and it really resonated with me because, as you said, we all have an expiry date. We don't want it to be sooner than later, but we all will expire at some particular time, right? And we were talking about your book during the break, and you said something really cool to me about the dog-eared book.
When I wrote the book, my vision for this book was that people would be running around with it dog-eared because they were turning pages on the corners, and in the book there's a place for notes and everything. If you flip to the back of that book, you've got notes. I didn't put enough notes pages in, obviously, because you're writing on the back of the book.
Yep.
But my vision was that people would put everything in one place. They wouldn't have Post-it notes everywhere. They wouldn't, have a piece here, a piece there, or whatever. It'll all be in one place. And that's why this book has been lovingly coined the book you never loaned to a friend.
Yeah, it's true. It's true because you actually I actually ended up writing personal notes in there and circling things and going through it and saying, okay, page 136, okay, page 84, or whatever. And they're great references. And I know that reading this book, a lot of it made so much sense to me. And I am in the industry, and I hear and see so much. But you still refreshed my memory, and you still reminded me of certain things that I didn't know.
Good.
But there are so many people out there, especially women, that say, I don't need to know this right now. I have time to learn this, and I'll figure it out when I need to know. But that's not right.
My husband was 39 years old when he died. I tried 4 times to have a conversation with him about his final wishes. He drove motorcycles and flew planes. He thought he was immortal, so he would never have the conversation. He had lots of time. I hear that so often from women. Oh, I don't need to worry about right now. Anyway, I've got too much on my plate. Like, I'm exhausted at the end of the day with kids and this and work and whatever. I don't want to. The other thing, too, is it scares a lot of people. One of the reasons why I wrote the book, and I did it the way I did with the 33-page master checklist at the back of the book, is because I know that this is a fearful conversation. We both know that, and women don't like this conversation more than men. And so what I wanted to do was take the fear out of the conversation by equipping people with knowledge. What kind of questions should you be asking? Who are the individuals that it's important that you get together with? Financial advisor, lawyer, accountant. I even talk about pre-planning your funeral.
Actually, you know what? It's really interesting that you say that because I think probably about 15 years ago, my mom and dad sat me down. And they're both alive and healthy and great right now. But about 15 years ago, they sat down and said, okay, here's the deal. We went and we purchased a plot and we've paid for our funeral.
And what was your reaction?
I think at that point, I was like, I don't want to hear about this, which is the normal thing for everyone to think about. And we were having a chat at home. My fiance and I were talking, and I said to him, I told him about this, and he said, well, your parents must really love you. Because in order for them to go ahead and do this, they've taken a few things off of your plate when that horrific time comes.
Exactly. And that's back to that whole courageous conversations thing at the beginning. After my husband died, I begged my parents to plan their own funerals. I said, don't do that to each other, because it was like he put handcuffs on me and blindfolded me and said, go plan my funeral. I doubted every single decision I made. Would he want this? Is this right? And then I had to take into account his family and everything. It was gut-wrenching. It was horrible. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. So I'm big about talking about all of this stuff.
Well, the thing too is you're grieving. You're grieving from a shock to the system, a shock to your life, a shock to absolutely everything. And now you've got to put your brain in gear and start making all the proper decisions. And that's probably the hardest thing you'll ever do in your life.
You often hear people talk about the 5 stages of grief. Well, personally, I don't believe that personally. I think everybody grieves in their own way. And it was actually strenuous on me because I kept thinking, okay, so what's the next stage? Like, how come I'm not there? I started to get anxious because I thought, wait a minute, I'm not doing this properly. Like, I'm supposed to go through all these steps and it's not happening. And as I said to you before, I couldn't decide what vegetable I wanted for dinner, but there I am having to call companies to cancel Visa cards. And, when somebody stumbles mumbles over, you know, I'm sorry for your loss, then they tell you how much you owe and they want the money now. You know, everywhere I turned, somebody had their hand out asking me for money. The only person who had their hand out giving me money was my life insurance advisor.
Right.
That's the only place.
And that's one of the things that you talked about in the book as well, was mortgage. The mortgage. You thought that you had mortgage insurance.
Well, I did have mortgage insurance, but I went to the mortgage institution to try to pay off my mortgage and was told no, we had renewed the year before, we were locked into a 5-year term, so I was going to have to wait until the term was up. I went, wait a minute, I'll pay the penalty, I don't care. No, you don't understand, you've got to wait. Luckily, my advisor had me write a letter that went all the way up to the top and came all the way back down, and I got a phone call inviting me in for tea and to sign my mortgage off.
Isn't tea lovely?
Oh, it's lovely. But you know, the thing is that all of these things, and they come at you in waves. And the other thing is that your emotions come in waves as well. And I was dealing with a daughter as well, who just lost her father. And in my daughter's case, she eventually just shut down completely because she figured there could only be one person grieving in the household. And what she went through, she wrote her own chapter in the book.
I was going to talk about that.
Daddy's Little Girl.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, that's why I tell people, don't read this thing in public.
Right.
You know, a friend of my husband's was on a plane reading it, and he was sandwiched between 2 people in the plane, and he's got 3 daughters, and he's sitting there and he's crying. And his buddies are with him because he's going to Florida for a golf thing, and they go, what's the matter with you? He goes, oh, allergies. Oh, allergies. And he couldn't get his hand in his pocket for a Kleenex because he was sandwiched in. And he said to my husband, because I'm happily remarried, thank goodness.
Right.
But he said, why didn't you tell me not to read this in public? He said, I did. But you know, everybody goes through it. My parents were grieving. It was like they'd lost the son they'd never had.
Well, everybody does, whether they are a family member, a friend of a friend, an acquaintance. I mean, everybody grieves. We're all human. So if we know of somebody and they're close to us, whether they're a business associate, a partner, or whatever it is, you know, a friend at the airport, a friend at the motorcycle, wherever he goes and races his motorcycles. I mean, it's not just you and your daughter and your parents. I mean, there's a huge community that grieves.
My sister's husband and my first husband went to Air Cadets together at 13. They were closer than brothers.
Yeah.
So you're right, it's a ripple effect that goes through. It's not just the person who's going through it.
So we'll be right back with Finances Personal after the break to hear about Jane's personal journey in her book, With the Stroke of a Pen, Claim Your Life. Welcome back to Finances Personal. I'm Liz Naumovski, and I'm thrilled to have the best-selling author Jane Blaufus on the show today. Jane, one of the things that resonated with me in your book was you mentioned that you had to take off your superhero cape.
Yeah.
Because as women, we feel that we have to do it all. We have to know it all. We have to be that superhero for everyone. But that's really not the case.
No. But unfortunately, we do that to ourselves. So after he died, I thought, okay, what's wrong with you? You're intelligent, you're well educated, you know this stuff, you're an executive, pull up your pantyhose and get on with it. And so I use this as a visual, and a lot of women relate to it. It's like I put a cape on and I tied it tight around my neck, and I just kept tying it tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. So to the world at large, I looked like I was holding it all together, that I wasn't doing too bad. But behind the facade, I was an absolute wreck. I would cry at night, I couldn't sleep, I would leave the TV on because I didn't want to be alone in the dark and whatever. And he died in July. I had to go back to work. I went back to work 6.5 weeks after he died, and people said to me, what are you doing? Like, you're getting paid your full, stay home. I said, what am I supposed to do?
Right.
Watch the paint dry? I said, my child has to go back to school. I would have been one heck of a role model going, you go to school today, sweetie. Have a great day. Mommy loves you. I'll see you at 4. I'm going back to bed and getting under the covers in the dark. So I went back to work. I was very fortunate that I was working for a great company with a structured return to work program. But what people didn't see was me behind the closed door in my office falling apart because people kept lining up at my door who wanted to see me, they wanted to touch me, they wanted to hug me, they wanted to give me their condolences, and I literally would be standing in my office holding a colleague in my arms who was crying over my loss.
It's a tough one because we all have emotions, right?
Yeah.
And we feel for each other. And sometimes us feeling that emotion is worse for the person that's just gone through the tragedy.
There were over 500 people at the funeral. We were big people in the community in terms of volunteering and our daughter's school and everything else. But 6 months later, so here's something that people don't think about. The first year is all firsts. So he died in July, it was his birthday in August, our wedding anniversary September, my birthday in October, Thanksgiving, my daughter's birthday December 22nd, Christmas, New Year's, and in January I had a nervous breakdown. I hit the wall so hard that I thought I would never get up again. I was literally sitting in my office with the door locked and the snow coming down outside of the office on the phone with one of my best friends, and I couldn't even speak. I was crying so hard.
But that's not shocking to me because if I don't know something, I need to go out and ask for help. But I think I'm a little different than most people. We go through hard times, seek a therapist, a psychiatrist, seek help.
I did.
And whether it's a financial advice, whatever it is, we need to seek help because, as you said, you're not Superwoman. We never are. We're good at certain things that we do. We're not perfect.
No.
We can't. We can't
be everything to everyone.
Absolutely.
And I was trying so hard to be a great mom and a role model for my daughter that I didn't see what my own daughter was going through because my grief was so bad. I found a therapist. I reached out and asked for help. And as I say to women all the time, asking for help is not a sign of weakness. Asking for help is a sign of strength.
Agreed.
Because it takes more to ask than it does to hold back and not go there. I even made my daughter go to a therapist and it wasn't a good experience, so I became her therapist.
Right.
So I'm trying to deal with my grief. I'm trying to, and in my case, it was also a high profile accident that my husband was involved in. So I had that added pressure on top of it. So I'm always saying to women that you have to take responsibility for your own financial future, your independence, because as I lovingly say, a man is not a plan.
You know what? And that's one of the things I wanted to say to you, because I hear you say that all the time. A man is not a plan. And I've said that so many times. There are some people that want to marry up and think that that is their financial plan. But you know what? That is that person's money and not yours. So you really need to have your own money. Your plan should be you.
A man is a partner. A man is not the plan. And the thing is that you, as I always say to women, you can't beg for forgiveness afterwards for ignorance. If you don't take charge of your own money, if you don't understand where you're going, then shame on you.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
No,
I'm quite vocal about this. I'm quite vocal about this.
I think we should all be responsible for our well-being and for our finances, because you know what? When you're responsible, people can't take it away from you.
No, they can't. And the other thing too is we have to teach our daughters this as well. So if we're not modeling it for ourselves, then we'll never be able to model it for our children. We both know this is part and parcel what's attributing to the lack of financial literacy. I'm not surprised as to how many women or adults reach adulthood these days and have never had a conversation about household finances.
And that's why we do this show.
And good for you.
Thank you. And the other, my one last question to you is your daughter. I read your book and I thought, how courageous of her to put her thoughts and her heart and her soul into a chapter of what she had gone through at the age of 12 and how her life has morphed and changed.
My daughter was 12 and a half when her dad died, and she was 24 when I wrote the book. So I sat down with her and I said, this is what I'm doing. Do you want me to write your story or do you want to write it yourself? And she says, can I think about this? And then she said, what do you want me to say? I said, I just want you to share with parents and kids things that could help them get through this. So she went away, she took 2 weeks, she came back to me and she goes, okay, Mom, I've made a decision. I'd like to write my own chapter. The interesting thing was, I didn't know her story until then, and she didn't know my story, because I didn't let her read what I'd written.
Right.
I wanted her opinion and whatever. And I've had so many people tell me how important the information she shared. And I had the honor and the pleasure of taking her to Thailand with me in 2017, where I spoke in front of an audience of 2,000 people.
Wow.
And she was in the audience. And it was the first time she'd ever heard me tell the story on stage. And when I came off to be unmiked and I walked to the back, I'm going to cry if I keep going down this. She came out of the shadows and she was crying. She's 5'10", I'm 5'8". She grabbed me and all she said was, "Mommy, I'm so proud of you." And it was then that she understood the magnitude of having shared our story, that how many other people we've managed to help. And that's the only reason I wrote the book, Liz, was to help one family, never to have to go through what we went through.
And that's what I was going to say. This was a really good read. And for the viewers of the show, you are giving us a code for a discount.
Yes.
And we've got it up on the screen. The passcode, the
promo code
the
is,
promo code,
yep.
And you can say it.
It's 3 with a capital E, because this is the 3rd edition of the book that's come out.
Okay.
And there's also a companion planning binder that you can learn more about on the website. But I'd like to offer that to your viewers, and as a thank you for having me as your guest today.
Oh my gosh, it has been so much fun. And, you know, I feel like I've known you for years,
I know.
and even though we just met, I feel like you've been a part of my life for such a long time, because I resonated with your story, and I know that you've helped me, and I know that you will help so many other women out there, and your book is very important, and I think it's a really good read for everyone.
Well, and I think it's a good read, and people are gifting it to their family members
They
and their
should.
friends and saying, "You've got to read this. You've got to read this." And by the way, you're not going to get rid of me now, just because we've had our time together today.
Perfect. That makes me happy. So everyone, if you get the opportunity to watch this show, watch it in its entirety and get the book, because it'll really help you. And you never know the turn your life will take, so make sure you're prepared. If you haven't done so already, it's time to have those courageous conversations with your spouse, your partner, children, and loved ones before a sudden illness strikes or crisis happens. As Jane says in her book, have faith in yourself, lean in, listen to your head, your heart, and your intuition, and know that only you can ultimately determine what is right for you. Trust yourself. I'd like to thank Jane Blaufus for joining me today and for sharing her personal journey, and you, our viewers, for watching. I'm Liz Naumovski. Bye for now.